order for the Public Utilities Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Roll call, please.
Since the last commission meeting, we've received Patrick Wusso's resignation from the commission. So members in attendance, Higgins,
Here.
Matten, O'Day, England.
Here. Everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I do have 3 additions that I'd like to add under new business. For item C, it would be to discuss backfilling the lineman position. Item D would be to discuss the business district incentive recommendation. And item D would be to discuss frozen water lines. Does anyone else have any additions or to the agenda?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right. To approve the agenda, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, we need a roll call for that too. Should we do a roll call for the agenda?
I'm sorry, yes. Aye. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Notice to the public, all matters listed are considered routine by the commission and will all be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time of the commission votes on the motion to be adopted by roll call.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Higgins,
Yes.
Matten,
Yes.
England.
Yes. Motion passes. We'll move on to public forum. This time is allocated for citizens to bring matters not on the agenda to the attention of the commission. Time limits may be imposed. Is there anyone here for public forum? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the commission committee reports, starting off with personnel committee.
Nothing to report. We didn't have a meeting.
Okay. All right, moving on to finance operations committee. We do have, along with that then, there's some agenda requests. So Commissioner Higgins, would you like to present those?
What's that mean? What do you want me to present?
Yeah, so the first one we'll talk about is the ClimaVision lease.
Okay, so we had a meeting, talking about the ClimaVision lease. We have recommended that, coming out of the committee, is that we move forward with negotiating a lease between the commission and ClimaVision for the installation and attachment of a weather radar at the state hospital. We make that recommendation. I have some stuff to talk about, but I think I would do that after, during the comments period. Is that correct? Okay.
Sure. Okay. Let's see, so the action here is that we will move forward, so do we need a formal action on that, or, yeah, okay?
So Mike would make the motion.
I make a motion that we move forward with lease negotiations with ClimaVision for the installation of the weather radar at the state hospital site.
And I'll second for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
We made this motion last month to move it into direct staff to start working on a lease contract. So I'm not sure why we have it on here again, but I mean, we can move forward again. It just seems like a duplicate.
Okay, I have two things to discuss. Do we have are we going to be required to have staff there when they're working on the building, maintaining the equipment, or do they get to come have a key to get up on the water tower and they come and go as they please? That's something that, in my opinion, needs to be wrote into the lease. And if we have to have staff there, I think we should be compensated for having staff there while they're working on the water tower. Or if we have to, like, if they call us and say, we gotta get up there and do something, I believe that we should get reimbursed for our staff's expenses to handle that. That was one thing I wanted to discuss. And my only other concern with that lease is the right-of-way disclosures with the state. I have a copy of the lease that we did with the state and reviewed it. It's pretty vague. The right-of-ways, it looks like there's one for a force main, one for a water main, and one for the water tower. It's very old, and most of the covenants, from what I can read, I'm no lawyer, but ran out at maybe 20 years ago. So I just think that, do we use the same lawyer that the city attorney uses? So I guess I would just like to make sure that those things are addressed by our lawyer, to make sure that, I have experience with a tower and right-of-way issues, and it can be, it's written very similar to this. It looks like the same guy wrote it. And there's just there's no bumpers. So them are my only two concerns with that I would want to see negotiated in the lease.
Okay. Trent and Charlie or someone, what are your thoughts on staff being on site while they do this work? Any idea about when they would be on site to do some work and to have access? What are your thoughts on that?
So at this point, we're working through the lease negotiation with them, so we can add these pieces into the lease. So what staff's really looking for direction is, these are great things we'll add into that lease. I do not believe that there'll be much for staff time on this as the construction and the project's being developed. We've already indicated to them that we would have a third-party engineering service oversee that. So as they're welding on our tower, there's paint, there's all these different things that have to be done. So we would have a third party look at that and make sure that that is all being done correctly. So they did have the appetite to look at what that cost would be and add that into the lease agreement. So as far as day-to-day operations, I don't think public utility staff will have to be there much, but that's definitely things that we can talk to and see how often they are doing maintenance or how often they need to access the tower. One of the first things we did tell them that we will not allow BPU staff to be on that tower while the radar is operating. They did prove to me with some different documentation that it is safe to have that tower running while staff is up there, but that'd be an SOP that we would write that we would not allow staff on that tower while it's operating. So we'd have to have means of disconnect, some type of an SOG with them as we're taking it on and off if we have to do service on the tower or do inspections.
And there again, I just feel like there should be a, if they call and after it's up and we're out of the third-party stuff, if they call and we gotta send staff out there for 3 hours, I just think there should be some compensation. It's, I understand we're, not charging them for it, but I just, we gotta not incur costs like that. So something simple, I don't wanna overcomplicate it, but just something, if they call and we gotta go out there, it triggers either an hourly rate or a flat rate, I don't care, something.
That's direction we can definitely add into the lease and present back to you before it's approved. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yep, so last month, there was a boilerplate lease that was provided to us for review, and there was some concerns that came out of that. I think it might just be a little easier for everybody, once the lease is created, for us to review it, as you indicated, and then express concern, rather than try to have you remember all of the concerns that we may or may not have at this moment.
Is the city attorney aware that we need his assistance?
He will be. We haven't sent it over
Okay.
to him yet. We'll have something for him.
Okay. Good comments. And so the direction here then, our action is to, do we want this to come back at the next commission meeting then? That seems like to makes the most sense.
We can come back with it when it's been reviewed and we have a more
Okay.
formal draft for
Okay.
review.
I would like a few days to review it before we come to our next meeting.
Climate Vision doesn't need it till the 1st of July, so
Okay,
we have
time.
time.
Okay,
But the Finance and Operations Committee meets again. Mike, you could certainly take a look at it. So whenever you have it ready, I think that's appropriate. You and Mark can take a peek at it. All right. Okay, so no action needed there. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, there was action. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
you have a motion, I was just gonna.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So the motion is to So what was that motion?
Last month, we had a motion to table it to committee. It's coming back from committee with a motion to move forward with the Climate Vision lease. So the motion was to,
Move forward negotiating the
Forward.
lease.
yes.
Okay. All right. So any other discussion? Okay. Hearing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, moving on to item number 2. Discuss AEP updates and approve sale of excess capacity. I don't know if Chris or Danny or Mike, if you want to take this, or all three.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the January 2025 Commission meeting, Commission approved an extension for the purchase power agreement with AEP. And at that time, set a limit of $49.70 per megawatt hour. After that meeting and working with AEP that day, we were able to secure a rate for the 2033, 2034, which would make the average out to be $49.35. So it came in quite a bit under the upper limit that Commission had set. So that's an update. On February 5th, 2025, staff met with AEP to review updates to the energy portfolio, including potential opportunities for selling excess capacity. Selling this additional capacity for May 2025 to May 2026 could generate approximately $163,200 in revenue for the utility. For reference, Commission previously sold excess capacity for May 2024 to May 2025, yielding $203,300. The Commission now has the option, again this year, to sell additional capacity ahead of the upcoming auction at a secure rate of $82.19 per megawatt hour day, or could also vote to wait, and this number would be adjusted based on market conditions at the time of auction. AEP has also identified a buyer within the region willing to purchase at the $82.19 price, ensuring the transaction and current rate if we execute it promptly. And then I guess the third point is that additionally the increase of going from the current rate to the $49.35 will create, under the 17th Amendment of the contract, will increase power costs, obviously, so we need to make some considerations as to how to implement a rate increase for the power cost, whether through a power cost adjustment or a actual rate change to be effective June 1st, 2025, when the new $49.35 takes effect. Staff recommendation coming out of committee was to sell the excess capacity prior to the auction, and that we go with a power cost adjustment mechanism for the new rate. Any questions or comments I can answer?
I have none.
What was that? Sorry?
I have none.
Okay. Yeah, I don't either. Anybody else have questions? Okay.
I make a motion that we move forward according to the staff recommendations.
I second that.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to the approved Baxter wholesale rate. Who would like to take this?
So at our meeting, we talked about this quite a little bit, and we came up with a recommendation that for simplicity, for billing and achieving committee's desire is to bill Baxter use at $4.92 per 1,000 gallons and credit any usage through October 1st up to 89 million gallons at $1.60. So basically, as long as they use the 89 million gallons, we'll sell it to them at $3.32 per 1,000, which is we figure a wholesale rate. The credit payment would be paid out December 31st, 2025. If Baxter did not use 89 million gallons, the rate would remain at $4.92. And I would make a motion that we move forward with this recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
you can second if you pass the gavel.
What does that mean?
Give it to your vice chair who isn't here. No, Dolly, you're vice, aren't you?
No,
Okay, well,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah, understood. Okay, I'm not going to second. Okay,
so it dies.
not hearing a second. The motion does not pass, and Commissioner Matten, do you have any? I have questions, but.
I do, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't agree with the mandate for 89 million gallons to be the requirement. I didn't agree with that. I don't agree with the dollar amount, because this is, as we had talked about at our last meeting, this is, this is a city that we work with, that I understand can be seen as a customer also, but they're doing the same thing that we are doing, and they're trying to provide water to their residents. And I feel sometimes it's no different than when other cities have major storms, and we're there to try to help, and vice versa. I think it's a little bit of, there's some fairness here. Mr. Evans went through a great deal of work to come up with our cost to produce the water, and then tacked on, something, because obviously we can't, I know we've gone backwards on our water rates for years, to come up with a fair dollar amount. I know there probably is still some negotiating room on the rate itself. And I would be, for me, I feel like I am willing to say at this point, if we can come together or come to terms on a different rate and not mandate that they purchase 89 million gallons, because quite frankly, if they want to put a water restriction on Baxter residents for not sprinkling their lawns, then let that be their decision, not ours, to mandate that they would be purchasing that much money. So I would be comfortable if we could come to terms on, and I see that City of Baxter is here, if we could come to terms on a different rate, that would be more fair to both cities. And that would be my comments.
I agree. I had questions about the 89 millions, just having that mandate, as you say. And then, the point of having a reduced rate was so that there wasn't that financial impact that they had to incur throughout 25. So I agree. I feel like we should just negotiate that rate that we feel is fair to both. And so.
And Mr. Chair, I don't know if we could do that at this moment. Do we need to throw out a dollar amount?
Can I comment?
Response from, to get some response from the city, but I would propose somewhere around that $3.70 rate, if that would be something that would be acceptable. I don't know. I don't know the financial, I know Baxter sells for $3.86, so I don't know if that is still having an impact or not. But in fairness to the city of Brainerd and the ratepayers, I'm just trying to come to terms with a fair dollar amount.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Higgins.
So I understand your guys' concerns, and my concern is that we're dealing with the infrastructure and water wells and water mains and sewer lines that are crumbling. And we don't have, our wells are 50 years old, somebody said, or 40 years old. What if we start having problems with our wells because we're selling extra water to our sister city? And I said at the last meeting that I agree we should work with Baxter, and we should, they are a partner and a sister city. But, I don't see why we shouldn't make some money on this. We should be taking this money and putting it aside so that we can not run into the problems they're running into with our wells. Us selling water to them because they're in a bind and putting more stress on our wells and our infrastructure, if we're not gonna make some money and there's not gonna be some minimums, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We're gonna end up being suppressed someday because we're selling water to them, because they have issues and we're destroying our infrastructure and our wells at the same time. So that's kind of what we discussed at committee, and that's why we threw out these numbers. It makes it worth it for both of us, and it gives us some money to potentially put into new wells someday down the road.
Okay, thank you. Chris, can you remind me what your rate was? Was it 370 from the last meeting?
From last meeting, the rate was the 332.
332.
Which was was the number considered in committee. And just to remind council that the 332 does include percentages for consumer price index, debt service, reserve, and margin. So those components are already in the 332. So the percentage for those four type activities is above the production cost.
Could you go through those again, please?
The consumer price index adjustment, provision for debt service, provision for fund reserve, and a provision for operating margin.
Okay. I guess the other thing is if we're giving the money back at the end of the year anyway, I just, what I struggle with is just tying up somebody else's cash temporarily just to give it back to them. And that, because, I don't know, that's what it's all about, I think, is just that financial impact. So that's my struggle with it, but I don't know. The last time that we did this with them, I felt it worked out just fine. I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Higgins and Matten. I don't know, maybe if we could do that now, or the timing of our decision, I'll just ask the question to the city of Baxter, what does this mean in terms of when do you need to know by, and what would be best? Obviously sooner than later, but I don't know if either one of you gentlemen want to speak to that.
You should come to the mic if you're going to speak, please.
Yep, he's coming.
Thank you, President, Commission. Trevor Walter, Public Works Director for the City of Baxter. If you wanted to table it and go another month is not going to hurt us at all. We're looking at, I think in the letter, we said the earliest we would need to start purchasing is May. So we still have another 60 days to figure it out. So if you want to table it, talk some more, we're okay with that.
Is there anything in this proposal that you would be hung up with?
The 332 at least is giving us something that we're not going totally backwards. It's 386 is what we're currently at selling to our customers. So 332 I think is fair. I get where you guys are coming from. I think you got everything built into it. I mean, you've got a profit line, you've got debt service, you've got all your stuff built into besides what your rate to produce is. So that is what it is. Every city's different on what the cost to produce is, so.
Does the minimum give you heartburn?
Not really as much as what if we go over the 89 million? I would think that it could possibly be more than 89 million depending on what the summer brings, so. I would rather not have an upper limit. The lower limit, yeah, we'll just buy 89 million. We'll just make sure we do, so. I don't think we'll have the wells, our new wells online until probably September, October anyway, so I don't have a problem.
There was no discussion on a maximum either. Being in my industry, I understand that working on these big wells, you can run into a lot of issues. So
Yeah.
I don't think there was a worry about going over. The minimum was just put in place to make sure it's worth it to everybody to do something.
If we're at the 332 and we buy 100 million gallons, that would be fine with the city of Baxter.
Okay.
So,
Good to know.
yeah, I don't think there'll be a problem buying the 89 million, to be honest, after I've thought about it. I seen it on the agenda, seen your proposal, and had time to little think about it. I don't think it'll be an issue, but.
Yes.
So I then, knowing that, I would make the motion then I know we could table it, but I think hearing that, I would be comfortable selling for 332 per thousand with no minimums and no maximums.
Okay, is that a motion?
That would be my motion.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Chair, if you pass the gavel, it goes to the non-motioner. And then you can second it.
Okay, I'll pass it to Mr. Higgins, and I'll second that motion.
You run the meeting, Mr. Higgins.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries.
What's that? Oh, we don't have quorum?
Three out of,
You got a quorum?
we have a quorum. We needed 3 out of 5, one resigned, so we still have a quorum. We have 3 out of 4.
You have a quorum. 3 is a quorum of 5, or 4 actually, because you have a vacancy. Mr. Broyles will confirm this, correct? We had a legal opinion on this whole thing a while back. It's,
Okay, so we're good? All right. Okay, thank you. Item 4, schedule public hearing, project priority list request, main lift station improvements. All right, so Commissioner Higgins or anyone else want to take that one?
Chris?
Yeah, the project priority list, PPL, is a ranking system used by Minnesota Public Facilities Authority, PFA, in coordination with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, MPCA, and the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, to prioritize water, wastewater infrastructure projects for funding. The list helps determine which water, wastewater-related projects receive state and federal funding, including low-interest loans and grants. The goal is to improve water quality, protect public health, and maintain compliance with environmental regulations. Project on the list is not providing funding or considered for funding until the projects are ranked or prioritized. The submission is good for a 5-year period. Projects are ranked for several factors, including public health impact, environmental benefits, regulatory compliance, and readiness to proceed. As part of the PPL process, a submission of a facilities plan and public hearing must be scheduled. The PPL application is due March 7th, 2025. A subsequent public hearing will provide an opportunity for public input on the proposed improvements, ensuring transparency and community engagement in the planning process. The discussion will focus on project prioritization, funding considerations, and overall impact on the wastewater infrastructure. And we can answer any questions you have about the project. Again, this is just giving us the go-ahead to be added to the PPL list. This is not to come back for funding at this time. This is just, again, to get the project put on the list. So again, any questions you may have?
I make a motion to move forward with staff recommendation and get on the list.
Second.
Hey, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
On the recommended action, we also had recommended a public hearing be held at the next regularly scheduled commission meeting. That was part of staff recommendation. Just add that to the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion passes. Item 5, discuss Twilio outage notification rollout and employment. Did I say that right? Enrollment, yeah. All right, who wants this one?
I can take this one.
You want that? Okay.
So as part of our conversations, so over the last, I've been here now a year and 2 months. So over the last year and 2 months, we've been talking about a notification system for our customers. And as that relates, we have been pursuing this Twilio notification system. It's a text message notification system where when a customer's meter goes out, they would receive a text message. We're at the point now where we're ready to roll this out. Staff recommendation is to automatically enroll the known mobile numbers that we have from our customers, send them a text notification saying they've been enrolled, and they can opt out at that time. With the lead and copper service line work that we've done over the last 2 years, we feel right now our customer list with the mobile numbers is accurate as it possibly can at this point, with having all those touch points with the customers. So at this time, that is staff's recommendation to roll this out with that automatic enrollment. And we wanted to get committee feedback, and I'll pass it over to Trent to have.
Just a
further
quick clarification on that. This would only be rolled out to residential customers, so commercial accounts would not receive this notification. It would only be residential customers that would receive this notification at this time.
Is there a reason for that?
Our metering system right now, a three-phase system, only is metering one phase. So potentially a commercial account could lose one phase and we would not get an outage notification on that. So that's more working towards our metering system and how much more we want to add into that into the future. There's lots of cost. Typically, when we see an outage on a three-phase customer, we get other notifications that come to us through our SCADA system, and that's how we react and dispatch trucks for those outage restorations. Residential ones typically are larger outages, more customer impact, so the intent would be that the customer would understand that we're aware of an outage to slow down some of our call volume that we receive during an outage, helps us respond to calls better, faster, and the customer knows that we're aware of it. So it's tough when you call in and you get an answering machine, and do you know that somebody knows I'm out of power? This will allow them to know that they're actually out of power. We've received that, and that's just a better communication piece, or an attempt for us to make a better communication piece with our residential customers.
Okay, thank you.
This is just for discussion only, so we don't have any motion that we're looking for, but just to inform you, unless you want us to change how we're moving forward.
I just have a few questions. So is it a cost per text, or is it just a flat-out service?
Cost per text.
Okay.
And it was.
So we absorb it initially, and if they opt out, that's fine. The acknowledgement then for renters and landlords then specifically are both getting that text message? If the renter were to opt out, the landlord still is getting it, correct?
So currently, right now, anybody that has an account with Brainerd Public Utilities get the notification. So in a tenant situation, just if their meter in their lease agreement with their apartment or whatever housing unique situation they may be in, they would not get the notification if they're not getting a bill for Brainerd Public Utilities. So it would only go to who is actually paying the bill. And there's could potentially be some challenges there. With the rate of rentals that we do have, we're looking for maybe for some suggestions. We thought if we'd roll this out initially, there's potential for us to be able to have other people come in, but my fear is that those customers that are still experiencing that outage could still call in and say, I'm at this address. They just wouldn't get the notification because they're not technically paying the bill, so we wouldn't have their account information at the ready like we would somebody that has a service application with us.
Okay. I guess the reason I'm asking is I understand that initial rollout, but my question is it seems kind of reverse. It seems like we might be throwing money at this if they're not even acknowledging it, don't want it, but they don't take the time to unenroll. So would it be better to at least make the announcement initially and then ask for to be enrolled? And that way, if we're paying per text, it makes a little bit more sense not to just throw money away.
Staff is looking for direction. This is minimal cost on these texts. It's very minimal. I think it's the staff's attempt here is to really just improve our communication with our public during outages. We're coming into some nice weather now, but when it's 35 below out and you have no heat in your house, you want to know that somebody's coming. And so this is our attempt to do that. By rolling it all out at first, it gives them the option to say, hey, I don't really need to know, or I want to know. So staff can go either way with that. I think this direction is kind of what we're looking for.
And then one last question is this would coincide with operations of whenever there is an outage, it's on our website and it's also on our answering service, correct? Okay,
Correct,
thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, any other?
I believe the numbers for the text message, it was under $500 for this
Okay.
initial rollout. So that's the numbers we're talking about for text
right.
messaging.
Thank you.
Can this be used for educational purposes too, as we dig into our copper and lead water line replacements? I mean, a lot of times in my experience, sending a text message out to people in a group that I deal with and keeping them informed on stuff besides outages, just educational purposes. I think that's something that is needed. in the city of Brainerd, especially with BPU and especially with some of the issues coming up with lead and copper pipe replacements, PFAS in our waste treatment facilities. You know, there's a lot of things, a lot of big scary words that we could use this text message to educate people as well as record outages. So, you know, I deal with people across the fence at NP all the time saying, we didn't even know there was a bar or restaurant at Northern Pacific Center. And it's like, I mean, the amount of money I spend marketing and trying to educate people is unbelievable. So I just think this could be a tool that we could use for strictly educational purposes for our community as well.
I think that's a good point. If we want to have good participation in a town hall meeting, I think that's a great point.
Just for clarification, this original Twilio rollout will be just tied into our electric metering system. We do have other programs that we're looking at, that this is kind of our first attempt to cut our teeth on it, see how many people we do get response that want it, and we definitely plan on growing this. Our intent is to grow this for that messaging to come out. It might not be the Twilio application we use, but it'd be something very similar to that.
Okay. All right, so no action needed, just more informational, but thank you for being proactive about this and making it happen. Okay, we'll move on to old business, unfinished business, I should say. All right, so from a BPU staff standpoint, anything on this that is worthy of note that you'd like to have updates on? Yeah?
This was not included in the packet. There were just some updates to the verbiage on staff scheduling meetings, but there were no changes except for removing the one item that was requested to be removed last month related to the customer communication policy and the credit card transaction fees was moved to completed business. That was the only change. During printing, when I forwarded and emailed this to all commissioners, there was a question related to F on the electric transmission services to Brainerd with Minnesota Power. Staff are scheduling a meeting on the next steps to ensure that that's happening. Those were the only changes. We can answer any questions. No action items needed on that memo today.
Commissioner Matten?
Yep, I have a few questions. So on letter E, I don't know if the community is aware of the, I think it was the University of Minnesota. I did identify and does have an electronic map people can look up their addresses on. So I don't know if it's on our website. It may be, but
It is on our website. We also have an additional update related to the funding and
Okay.
another link to that map going out today or tomorrow. Our website will be updated with
we're
additional.
just trying to get that out to the community and to people. The more that know about it, the better. And then the other question, I'm still a little confused. I thought we were still talking about the credit card transaction fees. I didn't know that we've come to terms on what we're doing.
There was a motion made at commission in December's meeting to move forward with charging a transaction fee, and we're in the process of getting the administration of that done.
Of the verbiage on it. Okay, I think I'm just concerned about what's the verbiage say, or what will it say?
We had approved a 4.75% on all
On
transactions.
all credit card transactions. Okay, all right, thank you.
Going back to letter E, so I've had one customer reach out, and then they, I believe, reached out to you, but how is that going with people asking about the lead service lines and all that?
It's been going well. When we
Yeah.
first had our rollout, we had like 2-3 weeks of a lot of questions. It's really slowed down. We expect with updating the website this week, we'll expect an increase in call volume related to it. But that's what we're expecting. All of the funding related to the lead service line replacements or in this case, galvanized service replacements will be coming through the utility. So funding is required by the state to come through the utility. We will be rolling out a plan. And as that plan becomes available, well, more information to come.
Okay. I think to Commissioner Higgins' comment earlier, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice, some kind of a communication, way to streamline that and online somehow, I don't know, but, okay. All right, any other comments with unfinished business from anybody? If not, we'll move on to new business. A, authorized change in bank signers.
We have one more item under unfinished business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bolton and Mank is here to present
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
the 20-year wastewater study. So Morgan and Mac from Bolton and Mink are here. I will turn it over to Morgan.
All right, thank you. Morgan Salo, Project Manager with Bolton & Mink. So I really want to use this time today just to go over a discussion of the 20-year asset inventory and capital outlook for the wastewater treatment facility. In your packets, you have the report. There's a lot of information in there, so feel free to ask questions. You know, I want to use this time as a discussion so that we can understand kind of what we're looking forward to in the wastewater treatment facility realm, and then kind of talk about what the funding looks like for wastewater treatment facilities, and how to get on those lists. So overall, again, this report, it's a guide and a framework to assist in that decision-making process, you know, with future limits, with capital improvements at the wastewater treatment facility. And so we want to use this to build a facility plan around it. And the facility plan is really that documentation. It's the funding application for wastewater treatment in the state of Minnesota. And so in this report, we kind of go through the planning period. That planning period in wastewater, you got to look through in design conditions planning period, you got to look at a 20-year outlook. And so our design year is 2045. For this report, we had both communities, Brainerd and Baxter, provide planning documents, population growths, land use projections, you know, within both communities. So that was very helpful in understanding what the projected growth looks like in the communities. And so it's a good idea, though, to, like, with all of these documents, things change, and they can change fairly rapidly, specifically if there's industrial users that come in or large apartment complexes that can change the flows and loadings. And typically, you really only want to look at that when you have industries, right, especially food industries or metal platers or, in some cases, you know, bottling industries that have potentially significant high-strength waste or high flows. In the report, we go through the flows and loadings of the existing, of what's happening today over the past 6 or 7 years or so. Historically, the flows and loadings have been below the design conditions of the facility. The tables in the report kind of paint that picture. As we kind of get through the report, we talk about the existing facility. I'm not going to go into much detail on the existing components. Overall, the facility has been fairly well maintained. Charlie and his staff have done a phenomenal job of keeping things clean, keeping them operable, and that comes at a significant cost, though, because these things are wastewater equipment. Most of it's a 10 to 15-year life. It's a harsh environment, and specifically in headworks facilities and biological treatment and biosolids facilities, it's a very harsh environment, so that capital expenditure tends to increase at an earlier time than other infrastructure facilities. But overall, liquid treatment, and that's your treatment for screening, so that's headworks, screening, and grit removal. Your biological treatment, which is the sequencing batch reactors, that's where all the biological activity takes place in the facility, and your disinfection before it goes out to the river. Those processes are in pretty good condition. Those processes have capacity left in them. They've been overall very well maintained. However, as we were doing a walkthrough and working with BPU staff on looking at the facility, you know, from this holistic perspective, there are some deficiencies and some limitations with the biosolids. So again, wastewater treatment, we have liquid processing, which is the liquids. When you treat wastewater, you generate biosolids, right? That's a solid portion of the wastewater that we then have to treat. And so at the facility currently, there's storage tanks to hold the sludge once it's generated, and then we thicken it. So thickening is we're just removing some of the water, getting into that 5 to 7% solid, so it's still pretty soupy. And then we have to digest it. And so currently there's anaerobic digesters, which we heat the water and the sludge in there, and then the bugs do their work and they create methane gas. And so that gas is then used in boilers to, again, supplement heat for the digesters and also flare it off. Digesters typically have a very high O&M cost to them and a high capital replacement cost and rehabilitation cost. And so part of where we were looking at this is that's the limiting factor right now with the wastewater plant is the biosolids processing today. Like with all the other things going on today, biosolids is limited. There's a figure in the report that shows the storage capacity versus the holding time, and BPU is floating right on that line. So from 2014 to about 2020, there actually was not enough storage capacity for the biosolids that were being produced. And so that led to some significant shortfalls in the facility. And I think staff did a phenomenal job at overcoming those and putting some Band-Aids on the facility to get through. But that is the limiting factor right now at the wastewater plant is the biosolids processing. And so essentially it is maxed out. We're right at that line of storage capacity. There's a lot of new things coming down, from the state level and the federal level. There's a lot of terms we hear. There's nitrogen implementation in Minnesota. There's perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, right? That's a very big one right now. Both of those will impact biosolids in a significant manner because as you take more nutrients out of the wastewater, you generate more biosolids. And so in the report, we kind of go through, again, this is going to be a high-level discussion. We go through the inverse relationship between nitrogen and phosphorus removal. So if you remove phosphorus, your nitrogen goes up. Here's the thing. In Minnesota, there's a nitrogen reduction plan that MPCA has released. And 2027, and Charlie can help me too with this because he and I have talked significantly about this. 2027, there's plans to start looking into more of those nitrogen limits within NPDES permits in Minnesota. The goal is to reduce the nitrogen load going to the Gulf of Mexico by, I believe, 45% by 2040. And so MPCA has set this timeline up to have NPDES limits for total nitrogen reduction by 2027. Typically, there's a 5-year compliance schedule for permits. And so 2032, theoretically, could be the first year you start seeing limits come out for total nitrogen. You have something to add, Charlie?
Yeah, so just so our reissuance actually comes in our 5-year permit in 2027. So we expire in 2027, which we then go into. So we're going to be right at that cusp of potential implementation early, and we want to be prepared for that. So that's right around the corner, our expiration. We will start that renewal process 180 days prior to expiration, and that's when things could open the door to a temporary 15 nitrogen limit. So
and there's a phased
just
approach
yep,
MPCA is using. They're monitoring now. Some facilities in the state are on a monitoring plan for nitrogen, that if they're able to maintain a 15, that limit could get pushed out. Now, this is dependent. It has to go through state rulemaking process. That is a legal process at the government level that this still has to go through. And then there's still negotiating power with utilities, with MPCA in the compliance schedule for new limits. So as a utility, you have the right to work with MPCA and put a compliance schedule in of, X number of years before you'd be required to meet a new limit. And so nitrogen is kind of the first not emerging contaminant, first nutrient that we're going to be looking at that's spelled out in the report. If nitrogen improvements are needed, that's a significant capital investment because you will need to meet both nitrogen and phosphorus. Two of the main nutrients in degradation of water qualities in river systems and lakes. And so that does require significant capital improvements. PFAS, everybody's favorite word, right? PFAS, which is the perfluoroalkyl substances. So MPCA just in January released their biosolids management plan. And so Brainerd, in their liquid stream permit, the NPDES permit, they have a PFOS limit. And so on the liquid treatment side for PFAS, again, PFAS is considered an emerging contaminant. There's new stuff almost every month from EPA, the health agencies, the pollution control agencies on PFAS contamination and various things that go along with that in human health and environmental health. And so when we're looking at PFAS in the liquid stream, that's a significant capital investment if limits were to go down. And it all depends on the classification of your receiving water, right? Brainerd is discharging to the Mississippi River. It's a Class 2B, I believe, water. Class 1 waters are the highest classification of waters. That's usually where waters are used for drinking water purposes, so surface water plants. St. Cloud, upstream of that plant is a Class 1 water. Minneapolis and St. Paul, there's lakes that are Class 1 waters. So they're the highest protection classification. It's unknown at this time about what that's going to look like with PFAS moving forward. There has to be more guidance from the EPA and state agencies on what that's going to look like if they're going to reclassify waters for liquid treatment. We do talk about the liquid treatment here a little bit for PFAS. Right now, Brainerd is meeting the NPDES permit limit for PFOS. But the limit, Charlie, do you remember? It's
It's 283 or 238.
nanograms per liter. So we're
Nanograms
talking
per
a
liter.
small part. So that's parts per trillion. So that's a very, very small fraction, right?
Parts per trillion then?
What was that?
Is it like 7? Is it like 7 parts per trillion?
Are you questioning the current
Yeah.
report that I just put in? Yes, I believe last month was 7 going out and monitoring.
Thanks.
Yep. And so with PFAS, right, we got to consider both liquid treatment and the biosolids treatment. So again, when we have PFAS, if PFAS is coming into the wastewater plant, there's going to be a fraction that goes out in liquid treatment. There's a fraction that's going to generate, combine with the solids and go into the biosolids. So that's what MPCA just released their guidance on in January, was the biosolids management with PFAS. And so what that essentially set up was a 4-tiered system that, based on concentrations in the biosolids, what was available for land application, and there's certain criteria within that of notification of landowners, people that are renting the land, and then just no land application whatsoever. That's the highest tier. Charlie?
I think we should stress the importance of the volunteers that we have right now that accept our biosolids. I think that is a very, it's all volunteer. We own nothing. We have nothing that we can go to. So we have a one phase approach, and that is liquid biosolids. We have no redundancy or alternatives at this time.
Yeah, and so there's just some risk, right? I mean, this is that framework, the guidance, and so it does lay it out in there of kind of like, okay, if and when PFAS it becomes an issue in the biosolids, like what do we do? Landfilling may not always be an option because landfills don't have to take it. It has to meet certain criteria. A lot of the facilities that I work with, it's difficult to get landfill approval. You can't haul liquid biosolids to the landfill. It won't pass a paint test. Then you got to beat your metals and insecticides and herbicides. So it's quite a process, and it's a lot of money in testing to be able to go to a landfill. Land application is the other very common use in Minnesota. Great beneficial reuse of a highly nutrient product. With the biosolids, a lot of nitrogen, a lot of phosphorus, a lot of carbon, right? Especially for hay fields and croplands. But if PFAS does become a concern and you can't dispose of the solids, what do you do with them? And so that's, as you're going through this and you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, because it's definitely worth a lot of discussions to understand how does commission want to move this forward? Like, what do we want this to look like at the wastewater facility for the communities? Because there's significant capital investments that have to occur in order to stay in front of all this and plan effectively. And so with the thinking about biosolids, as well, the funding of all this, right? Because that's what the biggest piece is, funding. How do we pay for this stuff? Well, in the report, we kind of talk through kind of some high-level funding opportunities. The first step is to write a facility plan and get on the funding list, right? And I think the recommendation here is write a facility plan, and we can phase in the improvements, right? Like, we may not need liquid treatment in the next 4 years, but that facility plan is good for 5 years, and then you can continue to update that. And so the recommendation looking at biosolids is, with the current setup, we're limited on storage, we're limited on processing capacities. If we were to look at facility planning for a biosolids treatment project, look at dewatering, so we'd remove more water, create what's called cake, and then we can go to a drying process. So drying would remove even more water and potentially get you to 95% dry solids. That does set you up for future PFAS destruction if and when you ever did need to do that. I'm a big proponent in planning for the future and looking at different things, but we also have to look at the economics of it. And it doesn't always make sense to do everything in one shot. That's why we look at the phased approach in a facility plan stage. It's talked about in a high level in here, but the facility plan does go into more detail, looks at O&M costs, looks at other revenues generated from various products, stuff like that. So, if you have any questions, let me know. The facility plan is that first step. And so those are due always in March. We just talked about having a public hearing for one for a main lift station. So those are due in March every year. There's a second piece that goes along with that to be placed on the Public Facilities Authority intended use plan. And so at the last commission meeting, we were approved to write the PPL and IUP application for drinking water improvements. So it's the same process with drinking water and wastewater. The application for wastewater is the facility plan. You have to have that 20 years laid out with additional cost components in there, submitted to MPCA for approval for the Clean Water Revolving Fund.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So where we're at currently with what you guys have prepared, can you just speak to the timing of when we could get on a bonding bill and what year would that be based on where we're at right now?
So bonding, that's a good question. Bonding is dependent upon the legislature, putting an omnibus spending bill together. I'm always optimistic with omnibus spending bills because it is typically bipartisan. The legislative session ends, in May of this year. So applications for facility plans are due in March. March, I think, is right around March 7th. So you'd be looking at submitting a facility plan in March of 2026 for the following fiscal year. And that's pretty typical with a lot of the planning phases in wastewater. There is also capital bonding requests that go along with that to get direct appropriations like what you receive for the reclaim tank. That's another option for that. So we'd be looking at a March 26 submittal for fiscal year 27, essentially.
And then we get the money in 28, right? Is how that would work?
20,
For the project? I mean, it's appropriated, but then when would the actual construction take place and then when would we begin to incur costs?
It would depend on when you want that project designed. PFA likes to fund shovel-ready projects. So you could design the project today and then, submit a facility plan, get that approved, and then get it certified, because you have to be certified once you're on the list. But you could by 27, because you'd submit in 26, and then you would design typically that year of 26 into 27, submit for approval or for certification, and then go bid the project a year, in 27, spring of 27, summer. Yes.
I don't know what they call it, but 3M put a bunch of money in a fund to deal with PFAS.
Yep, there's a trust
Is that
fund set up.
gone, or is that possible to apply for some of that money
So
as well?
that money was set aside for the East Metro specifically, due to the groundwater contamination for drinking water specifically.
Okay.
So,
Morgan,
yes, Jeff.
you talked about drying, getting the cake, and then the PFAS destruction. What's the, is it incineration at that point?
So PFAS destruction, it's, I could talk all day on this stuff, by the way. PFAS destruction is a newer technology. So what you need is, I'll use the term thermal oxidation. So you need very high temperatures in a very specific environment. So there are technologies out there that are being tested and piloted. I have coworkers that have gone to California to look at stuff. One of the promising technologies is called pyrolysis. That is a high temperature thermal oxidation process in the absence of oxygen. And so what they're doing is they're actually breaking the bond of the carbon fluorine in these PFAS compounds and the nutrients that because again, biosolids have a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, other micronutrients that plants need, but we don't want the PFAS in it. So the science and technologies that are out there, they're looking at breaking that carbon fluorine bond of the PFAS compounds and maintaining the beneficial use of the biosolids. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of research still being conducted. But like I said, there's a few plants out there that are piloting some of this technology. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
How far out do you think before this is gonna be proven?
That's hard to say. There's a lot of promising research out there. I was at WEFTech last fall in New Orleans, and there was a lot of presentations on not just liquid PFAS treatment, but biosolids PFAS treatment. Because there are states out on the East Coast, I believe Maine and Connecticut, that have outright banned land application of biosolids. Like no wastewater plant can apply biosolids to any agricultural lands. And so if you're a wastewater plant, what do you do? There's no other alternative besides trucking it out of state or destroying, incineration and going to ash. So I think things are always changing. It's ever moving. Like I said, there's a lot of good research articles. If you're interested, I have links to several of them. Just reach out to me. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff. But it is very, very fast paced.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Mike Hopper, Public Works Director. Do you have a chronological timeline? Okay, in '27, we need to do this and so forth. We need to have our applications in March 7th and so forth, and the dollar amount with that. So that's my first question.
Yeah, so if we were to look at doing a facility plan, March 6th, 7th, it's always the first week in March, something like that, we would want to submit a facility plan to MPCA.
Right.
And so that means you'd be starting that facility plan writing this spring and summer, writing that, getting it approved in January, February, and then submitting in March. That's the fast-paced track, right, for the funding schedule. You can always push things back depending on utility expenses and funding. And then you would look at designing, like I said, in, spring, summer of '26 to design the project. Because you can phase some of these things in. We can do a phase 1 approach of biosolids and processing. And then the liquid stream treatment, you want to be planned. We want to understand what is the potential, but you don't need to build that infrastructure today when there's no limit for it, because you won't get funding for it unless there's a limit. Right. So if nitrogen becomes a limit, then you have the opportunity to go get point source implementation grant funding. And by getting on the funding list with the PPL, you also open yourself up to affordability funding with principal forgiveness, other sorts of funds. And it also looks very positive for legislators when you go for a capital bonding or direct request.
Right.
That's the first question that they'll ask you is, are you on the PPL list?
Right. And then will it be helpful for us to get a shovel-ready contract and plans? Will that help us with that list? Will it move us up on that list?
It wouldn't score you any higher. But it would help with PFA when they look at placement on the IUP side. Okay. So PFA likes to fund those shovel-ready projects. They want to make sure that
they want to make sure they're ready.
They want to make sure that
is there funding for that? Because what would that cost be, just roughly? $1 million to get a project like this shovel-ready?
It really depends on the treatment technology, the site plan.
But ballpark. We're not talking $100,000.
Yeah, no,
right,
no, more than that. More than 100,000.
Is there funding for that?
So engineering fees are all reimbursable by PFA. On the PPL list.
Okay. Reimbursable. Okay.
Well, yeah, once you're certified, you have to have a certified project first.
So we need. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're still going, right? Or no?
I'm good. Any other questions? The funding process is it can be complicated, but there's a lot of pieces. Drinking water is a little more simple because you write an application, you submit it to MDH and PFA, and they rank and score you based on certain criteria. MPCA is the facility plan. And that's where you write the big, long report. It's adding on to this. It about doubles or triples the size of this just in the report, and the appendices make that a fairly significant report. So it's a pretty extensive evaluation in addition to what this is.
So using this, what decisions does the BPU commission need to make before we would start that facility plan? Like what would we need to decide? Would we need to take your report and make some decisions on the direction we want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And then we would hire somebody to start a facility plan, which would take, from what I'm hearing, 6 to 8 months.
In that time frame, yup. Facility planning, I always like to say, is anywhere from that 8 to 12 month process, depending on what you wanted. If you're writing a big facility for, a facility plan for a Minneapolis wastewater plant, it's a significant facility plan. But 8 to 12 months is pretty typical in the industry for a facility plan for a full-scale wastewater treatment facility. And that also includes time to work with staff to understand what other improvements, how do we want this, because once you get that report written, I mean, that's what MPCA is going to approve and say, for the next 5 years, we're planning on you doing these improvements or getting ready for these improvements. And so that's where if we start looking at the biosolids first, because it is the limiting factor right now, we're set up very well to take this, turn that into that facility plan, start putting preliminary things together for that, and getting that submitted by March of next year.
This is a good report. I spent an hour this morning actually reading it. I got 3/4 of the way through it. I had a headache and I stopped, but it is, from my experience, I appreciate the report and I think you guys did a good job. Those are big numbers though.
They're big numbers, yep. Especially when you start looking at additional nutrient removal and emerging contaminants removals.
You guys are following the state and what's happening down there on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to be able to give us a heads up?
Pretty much daily. From the engineering side of things, I have a lot of contacts in different offices, that I talk to quite a bit, understanding, what's happening at the state level with a lot of this stuff. We have, our funding group is tied directly into people in the funding world at PFA and MDH and PCA, understanding what's going on in the limits and the funding and how we're able to capitalize on as much grant dollars as possible. And then we have, lobbyists that we work with to advocate for communities for funding.
Commissioner Madden?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I'm ready to make a motion to accept staff's recommendation for accepting the final draft proposal for the 20-year wastewater use in needs assessment and direct staff to schedule a joint wastewater management board meeting as discussed.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second, open for discussion.
I would like to I would like to see a timeline from you, because I know we've had this discussion back when Jennifer was around, I think at BPU, and we talked about.
It's been a while, yeah.
It's been a long time, and we now I feel like we're in the 11th hour trying to do some of this stuff now.
Right, yeah, we did an evaluation in
Right.
20 with the biosolids issues that we had.
But just to make sure that everybody does understand that the wastewater treatment facility isn't, we share some of the costs with Baxter. So getting this in black and white so everybody can see what is needed and have that discussion moving forward and how we're going to proceed is going to be crucial in keeping that communication open. So I appreciate it.
Yep, and I can pull a schedule together, and then when we have the joint meeting, we can discuss that schedule as well.
So one of the concerns I have is that we're approving this today, and we haven't met as the joint wastewater management board. And so we met last spring. We talked about the importance of this. We talked about the importance of communication, giving both cities the heads up on the cost, right? And so we had a great meeting last spring. We were talking about potentially having that meeting, follow-up meeting September, October. And so, with that not happening, and then we're going to approve this now. So I'll just ask the question, have we presented this to the city of Baxter?
No, this presentation, I would suggest that we table this to the next commission meeting, but we have that meeting or try to assign the meeting with the joint wastewater board and then move forward with any questions at commission level, if you're in agreement.
Charlie, I think that makes a lot of sense. I just think it's out of respect, and you look at the projected population increases. I mean, there's Baxter certainly is a big player in this, and so I think it is prudent of us, and it's respectful to have that opportunity to meet with the joint wastewater management board, so that we can discuss this and review it. It's a lot of information, and so just to have the city of Baxter basically just have to watch an agenda online and read about it is not proper. I don't think it's the right way to do it, and so I really do want to have that meeting. So, yeah,
Well, I would be happy to rescind my motion simply for the fact that I was not aware that they weren't provided this report. I'd made the assumption that they were, so I would
Sure.
happily recall my motion.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Also, Councilman Jezik, I wonder if we bring this to the city council to bring them up to speed, and also the possibility of, plan design. This is something I think the council needs to be aware of also.
I mean, what is the dollar amount we're talking here? And, I mean, I see it in here, but I mean, what, it's between 40 million, 75 million?
60 to 100 million.
I was gonna say, it's way over 100 before, in 20 years.
60 million on the low end according to the report, 100 million on the high end.
And that,
1/3 Baxter, 2/3 Brainerd, so it's anywhere from 20 million Baxter to 300 or 33.3 million. Brainerd is 40 million to 66 million.
And Mr. Chair, just for clarification, that was the purpose of that joint, I don't know what it was referred to as. Yes, because we had two council liaisons from Baxter, two
Correct,
from
yeah.
Brainerd, to be able to make sure that the councils were made aware of what we were looking at. So essentially, a committee within a council meeting, so.
Correct, yep.
And Mr. President, just the drawings, to get this drawing done, to have us more favorable, I know for lobbyists, that is a big caveat. To have something shovel-ready is a big caveat, and that is what we would need to also discuss. So, thank you.
You bet, and that's a great point. So in terms of design and fees associated with that, so that's something that we have that budgeted for this year to jump into putting a facility plan together? And then also, I'm just asking that just from, do we have that budgeted in?
On our capital budget that was approved, we have 500,000 for 25, and then 25 million over the next 2 years for biosolids specifically.
City Baxter, I'm just gonna ask, but just from budgeting or just identifying the impact of what this project would be. We didn't have our meeting, but, so how would that look for you in '25? And just looking ahead, I guess, just in terms of budget conversations and.
sorry, Trevor.
Trevor Walter again with Public Works Director for City Baxter. We don't have anything budgeted for 2025 for the wastewater plant as it sits right now, other than the normal fees. The question is, and that goes back to that management board, is how is Brainerd BPU going to pass that $500,000 on? Is it gonna be part of the fee structure? Is that how it's being presented? That hasn't been, I don't believe, presented on our side as an increase in the rates of the wastewater treatment plant. So we definitely got some stuff that needs to be
Correct.
fully vetted out at the management board, because then the council members from Baxter, the council members from Brainerd, and the BPU is all there and hopefully get on the same page.
So if we work out the timing of this, so if we table this for next month, last Tuesday of the month, and then we have city council meetings in between now and then, so Councilman Liaison, Mr. Chezak, I'm wanting you to weigh in on this too. When do we plan this next meeting, joint wastewater management board meeting? When do we get information in front of city councils, and how do we make a decision as a commission with confidence that it's been properly communicated to everybody?
Our liaisons, our council members that are on the committee, they would like a minimum of 10 to 14 day notice. So we could have it as early as the middle of March, in my opinion, if we set the date today.
Point of clarification, Mr. President.
Yeah.
So the recommendation from staff was to take the draft and then follow through with what is our next steps. So that the point of the recommendation was accept the draft and then move forward with scheduling something with the wastewater management board, and staff will work with Baxter staff to ensure that we get that scheduled and everybody meets everybody's schedules.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for that. I just in looking at that line item, I just certainly want to make sure that we're communicating everything to everyone, so. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
This needs a high sense of urgency, in my opinion. And we need to get meetings scheduled, and if the city council needs to weigh in, we gotta move. This is, after reading this report, and talking to some people at the state capitol, myself in the last week, we need to move on this, in my opinion. This facilities report needs to go. Action, not meetings, not talk. Listening, I've only been here a couple months, but there's a lot of talk on this, and we need to take some action, so just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and this can be drafted into that facility plan. The first part of it is done.
So we save some money?
Yeah, I think we do need to set a date, for sure. But, I mean, we need to reach out and see what the availability is. So can we just reach out to those that would be attending that meeting and to try to schedule a meeting between now and the middle of March? Does that sound reasonable? Okay. And so I'm the person, right? So I would just work with distributing an email out. Would you be available to be at that
Yes.
meeting as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Who from the commission is on that?
President of the commission, and
I think the more the merrier. It's a big deal.
I would like to be involved.
Yeah.
You have to consider your quorum.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
you want more than 2 commission members on there. Like a committee almost, so.
Mr. President, if you would include me too, I
Yeah.
would appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
Yes, Commissioner
I
Madden.
think that if you decide to set a date, why don't we just adjourn to whatever date that you do set? So if you are going to leave it open-ended until we come up with that, maybe we
I
can
like
make
that.
that. All right, that way everybody has the ability to listen to and hear the discussions.
I think that's a good idea, and I agree, there's a sense of urgency here, and so, okay.
Well, adjourning a meeting is one thing, but when you adjourn and you have plenty of time for a public notice, you need to give that regardless. You don't just adjourn and then have a meeting that the public isn't aware of. So there has to be a notice given. If you have an adjournment to tomorrow or Thursday, that's one thing. But if it's 2 weeks out, or you don't just adjourn to a future meeting.
Right.
without a notice. So
So the question would be then, Mr. Chesak, could we adjourn to the Joint Wastewater Management Board meeting once the date is set and still do a public notification?
as long as there's
We'll
time
have
for the
time.
notification,
Correct.
sure. Yeah.
Can I make that motion? Do I need to make that motion?
See why you can't.
All right, then that's the motion I'm making.
Second.
Okay, any other discussions? Danny, it looks like maybe there is.
we're adjourning to a meeting that we don't know the date, so we don't have we'll work it out.
We're adjourning
That's
to the
correct.
meeting, yes, and we'll set the date, but we'll still do public notification because there will be time to do that because it's not going to happen tomorrow. We'll have at least 2 weeks minimum notice once the date has been set. Right. Right, but I don't foresee them doing that. We are looking at the middle of March.
Just do it as fast as you can.
So
Can
Danny,
I, can I add a comment
Yeah,
real quick?
absolutely,
Sorry for
yeah.
interrupting. The same goes with Baxter, potentially with the public meeting too, not just the management board, might be a good extension to have a disclosure throughout. Just kind of throwing it out there.
We'll have it at our next city council meeting next Tuesday, once we set it.
Okay. Can I work with you, Trevor, to know who the people are to extend that invitation to? So do you want to just work on it on your end, and then we can work with you as far as
We'll
who's
send
available?
you guys the dates that work for us.
Okay,
I'm guessing it's gonna be the week of March 10th.
okay, thanks for doing that.
Don't make it on March 10th. Busy that day.
Clarification, Mr. President?
Yes.
So there was a motion on the floor by Matten, seconded by Higgins, to approve staff's recommendation for the draft and then scheduling a meeting. Matten, you withdrew your motion. Higgins didn't say it specifically. I'm assuming you agreed with that.
Agreed.
And so now we're tabling it. Now we're adjourning to
Wastewater.
whatever the joint wastewater meeting date will be.
Yep.
That is the motion that's been on the floor. Matten and Higgins, that is currently the motion on the floor.
Correct.
Don't forget to include so public notice is given for that date, as long as there's gonna be a potential quorum of the commission at that, so that was part of her motion.
Correct.
Okay, good? Any,
Nice work, Danny.
Any further discussion? Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're moving on to new business. I thought that was new business, so sorry.
No, you're good.
I don't consider you old business. That was my bad. Okay, authorized change in bank signers.
Annual requirement for our finance positions with now the new finance committee and the change of the president. We request approval to change the authorized signers, removing Matten, adding England, and adding O'Day.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
If this is a policy, can we just, again, put it in position and make this a policy? So we do this every February and not make this an agenda item every year?
The bank requires it. So we're required to have.
Can we specify that it would be the current chair in the finance committee? We can't do that?
No, the bank needs it the bank needs it annually to change the signers. They need the motion and the vote before they will change. So it's a requirement by our bank and state
They do
statute.
that with us too, but we just have to show who the current president is. So that's why I asked the question, but that's okay. I was only asking. It seemed weird to have to do this every year, is making an agenda item, but, okay. So I'll make the motion.
Question, Mike.
Yes. Yes.
I believe the city side, all we do is we list it on the consent calendar. So it doesn't have to be a separate agenda item, but you still are officially approving it by listing it as a consent item. So a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Higgins? you have a
No, I was
question?
just,
Oh, okay. Okay, so we have a motion.
second?
We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, motion passes. Moving on to consider customer credit request.
I can take that one, Mr. President. We had a customer had experienced a leak in their crawl space. That leak led to additional use. The water in the crawl space was pumped out of her crawl space and did not enter the collection or the treatment system, and she's asking for a credit of her treatment and collection fees for wastewater of $113.75. This has happened a couple times in the past. And
I make a motion to go along with staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, move on to backfill lineman position. Who would like to take that one?
I can take it, Chris.
Go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Recently we had a resignation from one of our linemen, and so I can defer to HR Director Schubert for details and I guess just a game plan for backfilling the position, so.
So last week I discussed this with Chris Evans, and just to clarify, Mr. Chesak had talked about the charter a little bit as far as how recommendations should be happening. The charter language actually states that personnel for vacant positions may be recommended by the commission to the council. As an example, last year we hired several employees, and the commission did not provide a recommendation to the council for those positions. Historically, and as far back as I can remember, when backfilling budgeted line worker positions, staff has been given the latitude to hire either a journeyman or an apprentice level based on the applicant pool and the best fit for the department. For an example, last year we hired 2 journeymen and 1 apprentice line worker. With that said, if the commission wants to provide direction that we can only hire like a journeyman or an apprentice level, that is a different situation. So at this point, the information in my report was given to help clarify our process, primarily for Mr. Higgins, since he is new to the commission. Other than that, is there any questions that I can help with at this point?
Anybody have questions?
So as far as charter language, I don't believe I mentioned that. I just was referring back to what I recalled as far as the process, and I think it does retain to charter language, but you say typically we've just gone forward without a recommendation of staff requests from the commission here to the city? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, when we have had vacancies, or when we hire new positions, we don't need a formal recommendation from the commission as far as filling those positions. If that's a budgeted position, if we're backfilling someone that's already budgeted, that's it. However, like when we had new positions in the budget for 2025, we did receive recommendations from the council, the commission at that point, because it was something different than what has normally been done in the past, or a new position that was not in the budget.
Thank you for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other comments or questions about this? Do we need to take any action? It's just more discussion, okay? All right, moving on to business district incentive recommendations. So my understanding is that city council would like more of a definitive recommendation from us regarding this issue. Am I right in saying that?
At the last, not at the last council meeting, council did send that to commission. Commission had it discussed at the finance committee meeting. There was no recommendation coming out of the finance committee meeting. There was some discussion around it. And then it's added back on the agenda here.
Okay, and so really the question is just waiving all sack and whack fees for any permits within the River to Rail district, right? That's what we're talking about here again?
No,
No?
it's James is.
Yeah, so I can add to that.
Yeah.
The Central Business District incentive policy was passed by City Council. There was discussions from the commission on that. City Council did pass that, so very similar to River to Rails. It waives building permit fees up to $150,000 valuation, and then all sack and whack fees, park dedication. So that's what's currently within the policy. So because there was changes to the commercial corridor district that could have impacts on sack and whack charges that are incurred by the city, this was brought to the commission to discuss, should there be anything else added or changed potentially to the policy. I know one of the discussions, there could be concern from all charges being waived, and that could be a recommendation. Another one thing that was brought up at the meeting, at last month's meeting, was that maybe sack and whack charges over a certain amount would go to the Public Utilities Commission for recommendation to City Council. So this is an opportunity to provide that documented recommendation, and then it'd be at the next City Council meeting they'd consider it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so it was expanding it from the River to Rail district. It was 210 all the way down South 6 and kind of everywhere, right? So we did make those comments or just recommendations, but that wasn't official enough, so we need to officially provide those recommendations. Is it?
Yeah, through a motion, there should be stated recommendations on what the commission would like to see, if any, changes to the Central Business District incentive policy.
Did you guys already pass that? Did you guys already pass that, City Council?
Yeah, so that was passed. The EDA was the one that made kind of the formal recommendation to City Council before it went to the City Council meeting. BPU Commission reviewed it, had some concerns, noted at the council meeting. I know Council Liaison Chezak spoke about it at the council meeting about the concerns from the commission as well. City Council ended up approving what the EDA had recommended, was continuing essentially the same parameters of the River to Rails district, except expanded. And now it's brought back because the zoning district change that we had, now we allow mixed-use development on Washington Street. That's why this was brought up again. Because there could be fees that weren't originally looked at from the Central Business District incentive policy because it was just commercial. If you add residential to it now, certainly those fees could be much more substantial. So that's why it's brought back here for review.
Yes.
So something I've always it's concerning to me. One, I've never seen a map of these areas. I don't really know what area and what it's encompassing, so I have no idea what the financial implication is. I've never been an advocate of just waiving the sack and whack fees because I think we have a facility that we need to continue to maintain. And when we waive things like that, I don't know how we maintain or upgrade infrastructure when it is leading into to be able to service an area. So it may not be directly infrastructure within, that street or what, but it may be leading up to it. And I'm just, again, not knowing the area in which we're looking at, I hate to just wave my hand at this and and approve and have no idea what we're approving. So those are just my concerns.
So we could just make a motion and we'll just, I mean, we could just say what we think we need, and that's essentially what they're asking for, and then they'll make a decision.
Yep, that's
Right.
correct.
Okay, so we could just say what we feel is necessary for us. So if anybody wants to make a motion that outlines either a threshold or at least the opportunity to review a potential project, understand the financial impact of waiving those fees, maybe doing a study of the payback of the revenue generated by rates. Just throwing a few things out there like we talked about last meeting, right?
Yep, correct.
Okay. Anybody have a motion?
I have to abstain from this.
Okay, so if we have two people, we can't make a motion? All right, so there's it might,
An abstention is not you still have three people here. So if you vote, you motion, you can pass that gavel
Okay.
to the person abstaining.
got
You
it.
have a quorum right now.
Okay.
An abstention does not mean you no longer have a quorum.
Okay, perfect, thank you, Mr. Chezak. Okay,
Well, you so eloquently put it, I think that you should almost make the motion.
okay. My motion, my motion would be that the BPU Commission would request the opportunity to review opportunities that come up. And that would be to potentially provide some financial analysis of what waiving SAC and WAC fees would mean. And there's a threshold currently of $150,000 where that doesn't, I mean, it's all SAC and WAC from my understanding. That's what the policy is. It's regardless, right? Go ahead. Yep.
Yep, that's correct. So for a building project, it'd be 150,000. So if you think of a single-family home, you might have a $250,000 to $300,000 valuation. So it would trigger for pretty much every single-family home, just so you're aware. And if that's the commission's understanding, SAC and WAC for an individual home would be $3,300. So those have been the ones that have primarily been coming through. So, if it's the commission's wish to review everything, that would be the recommendation, or it could be at a certain threshold of SAC and WAC dollars.
Okay, here's my motion. I move that we would have the opportunity to discuss waiving SAC and WAC fees on a project that exceeds $150,000. That's what my motion is.
Second that motion.
Okay, there's a first and second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Sorry, yep. I think what we could also do then as part of moving forward is $60 to $100 million report that could be made aware to city council members and others that the EDA, for example, and quite honestly, just to have a face-to-face would be very beneficial. So, yes, we can provide a motion, but I think just having an opportunity to sit down and talk about it would really mean a lot as well. So, yes, sir.
Yes, can I just clarify? So the motion is anything under $150,000 would be?
Above, over 150, we would like to have the opportunity.
Nothing?
And that's building valuation costs, correct? Yep.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more discussion? Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. There you go. Thank you, Mike. Am I doing good, Jeff?
Good. I
Better
just,
than I am.
I just like how easy it goes without Mark and Patrick here.
No, you didn't.
All right, moving on to frozen water lines. To discuss the Brainerd Public Utilities Policy 2024-01. Does anybody want to take this one as far as discussing what's going on, what we need to talk about?
Essentially, it's a discussion item to reiterate our policy that we approved in January 30th of 2024. In discussions as it occurs to the responsibility of frozen water lines, our policy states and that clarification of whose responsibility of the residential lines and commercial lines. Residential being owned from the standpipe to the meter, and commercial being from the main corporation to the meter. Those are the ownership of those water lines. It also clarifies that property owners are responsible for those services, meaning whether it's a frozen water line, installation, any work that needs to be done, that is the responsibility of that said owner for whether it's commercial or residential. It also states that all customers are responsible for taking all the necessary precautions to avoid frozen water lines. We do list some of those precautions at our website, and then that the costs associated with that preventative measure will be incurred by the customer. However, if BPU determines that there is a necessity to keep a main from freezing and we will run water, that customers would receive that in writing, and those additional costs related to that running of the water to keep the main open would be waived. This policy had a change from what was previously done, in which we no longer offer the waiving of running water unless you receive written notification from BPU.
Okay, so it's just to confirm that that is our policy?
That is the policy we adopted in January of '24.
Okay.
Question would be if there are any changes. I don't know if any other staff had about their comments.
I have a question.
Mr. Higgins?
Yeah.
Just to clarify what you just said, so a homeowner is responsible from the curb stop to the house.
Correct.
The city of Brainerd is responsible from the curb stop to the main.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. That's all I got.
Okay, so no action other than just to confirm, yes, that's our policy, and we still think that that's appropriate.
Direction from commission if you want to change that policy, but that is the policy as it sits that was adopted in January of '24.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
why are you bringing this back?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that too.
We are having questions from customers on why the policy changed and what is the current policy. So we're bringing it forward today to clarify that this is the direction of commission for this
Can
policy.
you tell me what the policy was that they're questioning and the change in prior? I remember going through this last year, but I'm not sure what is the change that they're concerned about?
Thank you, Mr. Chezak. The concern was that in past years prior to the policy, that again, customers were either instructed or were allowed to flow water for the purpose or belief that the flowing water would prevent the frozen pipes, and that that usage was discounted. With the new policy, that discount mechanism went away. So basically, if a customer is concerned that their pipes would freeze, that, they could just crank a valve, faucet, what have you, in their house to drip to try to prevent pipes from breaking. And so I guess it was just some customers looking to be reimbursed for using the additional water.
So in other words, if they maintain their line properly, they wouldn't have to run the water. Because they're not maintaining their line properly, they're worried about it freezing up. They think they can run the water and not be charged for it. So that's the issue. But
Correct.
we changed it. That's no longer allowed, so that's why we had to change, if I'm not mistaken. So that's all I needed. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. President, is there anything that indicates in the policy that homeowner needs to correct this for the next season?
Nope.
The only issue we would see is if a water main would freeze. So as long as the water mains are flowing water, there isn't actually an issue with, so it's the service line
Right.
correction.
Do we have any water mains that are an issue?
We have some low water mains. We have nothing frozen as of today or in the last few years. Nothing is frozen. 2014, though, brings back a lot of harsh memories for people. Everything in the state froze. So the reality of it is, I mean, and that's just how we can't see where the water is frozen in the pipes. We don't have any technology to do that. So if there's 3 houses and the one in the middle has a frozen water line, but the neighbors on both sides have running water lines, the main is flowing. We can flow hydrants to do that, to prove that, but there's no way for it to determine exactly where that might be frozen. It's a cheap insurance to have your water run a pencil lead if you have concern through water line, and then reach out to a plumber as the policy states, to have a plumber come and take a look at your side. Sometimes installation, sometimes driveways have been added over tops of water lines, so there's lots of reasons how this could change annually from somebody from one year to the next, but that's on the customer side, not necessarily the BPU.
And I guess I would just comment that as a customer that has had, I haven't had water issues, but I've had some sewer issues with city staff, and sometimes our staff can come off a little harsh in the way they verbiage it, their narrative, and I think this is a good policy and it's a fair policy, but I think a constructive narrative on it, there again, education, like we talked about with the text messages. I just think we could educate our customers a little bit better. They are customers and they do pay us for a service, and I just think that some sort of a constructive narrative wouldn't hurt anything, but I do agree with the policy.
I think one thing I'd like to just add to the conversation is it's pertinent for us to, on these new installations going forward, that we make sure the checks and balances are taken care of, that these new service lines are installed in the proper depth and are maintained correctly. Most of these service lines they've been established for many, many, many years. And so many things can change over the years as far as landscaping and different things like that. So I think there's more conversations to be had to who has the onus between the city and the utility on those inspections, on those new service line installations, to make sure that we are checking the box. And that really boils down to the contractor installing it. And that's our job, to make sure that our citizens that are having this work performed, that are getting a fair job done, that contractors aren't burying things too shallow, because it's hard. Sometimes it's not easy to dig 8 feet in the ground. There's other means, installation, other methods that can be done. But it's our responsibility to make sure that our customers are getting taken care of fairly too on that end.
Good comments. Okay, anything else? Yes, yeah. Go ahead and state your name and address, if you would, please.
My name is Heidi Anderson, 9303 Virginia Street. I've been without water for 4 days. Happened on Saturday. When I called BPU for an emergency service, they came out and checked the main. I'm at the end of the line. They told me I couldn't call a steamer because of contamination to the water. I couldn't have a welder come out. The welding company that I contacted had bought BPU's old welder. And I've been at this location for 19 years, and this is, I believe, the 4th or 5th time that this has happened. Previous to this year, BPU has came out and taken care of all responsibilities. But now this year, I am stuck. BPU won't help me. I can't get a plumber out. I can't get a welder out. Here I sit, 4 days without water. What are my options?
Okay, so from a staff perspective, we went out and, as was stated, we checked the main and made sure that that wasn't frozen. Am I correct? Yep.
That is correct. In full disclosure, I just got back in the country about 12 hours ago, and I do plan on following up with you today.
Okay. Go ahead.
So my question is if we are able to help her, would it be a fee for service? No different than if the welder were to come out and be able to help her
So there's
along those lines? Just
potentially, there's a potential of running a temporary line between your neighbor's house and your house, but that's something that's on your side of it, so that's a plumber. So in the policy, this is something that you would contact a plumber to have you assist with that. In the past, you are correct, BPU has done things like that. When this policy changed in '24, that's kind of where we were unable to do that service anymore.
What was done in the previous 4 times? Do you recall?
I do not recall. I have to follow up on that yet.
Okay. Do you recall what was done? Maybe what BPU did in the previous 4 times?
They brought out the welder and ran a grounded it from the 2 water stops in circulared the electricity, from my
okay.
understanding.
And it's been, I believe 2014 since we've allowed welders on our system.
Okay,
That's been a little while now.
I believe in 2016, you guys came out.
I could be off 2 years on that, but I will follow up with you.
Okay.
Trent, do you think this is a main issue or not?
I do not. I believe it's a service installation issue. Not the fault of your own, but I think your service line is either not deep enough or not insulated.
But doesn't the city inspect that when there was a new house built?
In the past, the city was doing those inspections, not be Brainerd Public Utilities. So we do not have any documentation of your service installation.
So would the city?
That'd be a good question for the city. They should, yes.
So
When
I
was your
mean,
house built?
2006.
so from the city's side, who would Heidi reach out to on that?
So we could provide, I could get you my contact information. You could get that. I could also provide those to Brainerd Public Utilities. Anything after 2003, I think, should be in our digital storage area, so.
I mean, and my other question is, can we get a welder in the city limits? Like, there seems to be no direct documentation I'm just like, Brainerd City doesn't allow welders to come in, but there's nothing that we can find in written documentation that states that. But I mean, now I'm sitting 4 days without water.
But just from what I'm hearing, it sounds like both city staff and BPU will help, but our last lines of our policy do indicate that we reserve the right to deviate from this policy, to do whatever is in the best interest. So I think it's not going to get resolved here without anybody being able to look at some historical records or figuring out something for you. So I think that based on that, you're hearing from both city and BPU that we'll discuss with you some potential options and moving forward. But I think the policy was changed or was modified last year for good cause. And you might be one of those where this summer, having a look at your service line might be something that you should probably consider when the ground is thawed. So we don't have this future problem year after year or sporadic year after year. Sound fair? Okay.
And if you're willing, I will follow up with you directly after this meeting.
Okay.
Okay. What's your address?
9303 Virginia Street.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Virginia Street.
Virginia, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing this to our attention and coming today in person,
Thank you.
and we'll follow up with you. Thanks, Trent, for doing that. Okay, anyone else, any other comments? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to staff reports. With the city administrator report, not here today. Okay, all right. Council liaison report, Mr. Chezog.
I just want to thank Chairman, City Council President Mike O'Day for making this suggestion that we move these meetings here. I think the public, we can be very informed with seeing what goes on because at the location in Baxter, it works well. I can actually hear the meeting now. We're out there, it was very difficult, especially with soft-spoken people like Mr. Higgins here in the room. And anyway, no, but I think this is a wonderful move we made, and I'm glad, it seems like everybody here has got a smile on their face today, and they're happy we're here. Thank you very much, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. HR Director report?
Nothing in addition to my report.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay, Public Utilities Director report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing to add.
Okay, Finance Manager report?
Nothing to add?
Can I just quick thing, when we use acronyms, can you tell me what some of those acronyms are? I mean, you've got one under the Communities Local Energy Action Program, and I know you've got a few of them in your report. I have no idea what those acronyms mean, just because I don't walk in your shoes on a daily basis. So just, if you could spell it out one time, that'd be great, just so I can follow along. That'd be great. Thanks.
You remember I asked about that before, Dolly?
I missed it.
I,
is the energy laboratory, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It's who we're working with Region 5 on our.
New best friends. Okay, no, that's a great comment. All right, Operations Manager report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing to add.
Okay, Charlie, wastewater.
Nothing
Nothing
new
to
to
add.
add. No, not at this time, unless you got questions.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commission member reports. Mr. Higgins.
I'm looking forward to my tour, my commissioner tour they told me about. I didn't know I got one of those, so I can't wait till it warms up a little bit and I get to go see everything. That's all I got.
You could see the dam.
I was driving around this morning and I'm like, I've probably looked at the dam more than any human being in the world.
I think I might go with you on that one, Mike, tour.
If I said that, I'd get in trouble.
Okay, Commissioner Matten.
The only thing I would ask is that if we are setting up a tour, that we do invite the new city council person to attend also, if possible, so staff isn't having to, or anybody else that would want to attend for that matter, but so staff doesn't have to continue to do individual tours. That would be great. Just at least extend an invitation.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I have is there a joint meeting coming up with BPU Commission,
With city council?
with City Council? No?
We have a council retreat on March 10th. It's 8 hours, I think, and it's public's invited. That would include you, Mr. Anglin, and anyone else who wants to go. And it's, I believe the only thing I forgot is the location. Can anybody here remember that? It's a library?
Yes, I believe it's the library.
So it starts at 8 a.m.?
So it's not technically something commission goes to where we would have to adjourn to that potentially.
You would if you have a quorum. So if a quorum is planning on attending, you would have to adjourn to that as
Okay.
well.
I plan on going.
I can't go because I'm out of town, but,
And I won't be able to either.
okay, so we don't have to adjourn to that one.
Thank you for
Okay.
asking. Good idea.
As far as the commission being there though, is there a certain time frame or is it just come to the whole thing and?
Well, again, I think once we get an agenda, which I think will be coming out fairly soon, I would imagine probably, I'm guessing we might have that by the 3rd.
Okay,
I'm purely speculating, but I would think there's going to be some agenda. Maybe maybe Mr. Habacourt. Of course.
Yes, I'm not, I can't remember. We just had a meeting yesterday, but we're talking about something totally different. I will get that information and I'll pass it on.
yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, that's all I had. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Same sign. All right, thanks, everybody.